This is a map of Mali, and I began my research here in Mopti for 3 months. I was supported by the Near East Foundation. I'm sure some of you are familiar with. It's based in Syracuse. But after those 3 months, they decided it was too risky for me to be there. They cut me off, and they told me to leave the country. So, not wanting to throw several years of research down the drain, I said, I'm not going to leave. I had to wait to go to Mali for a year. So I was doing interviews with the Malian diaspora in the US. And so I emailed everybody I knew in the US, every Malian. I said, do you have friends or family that I can stay with? Or they know somebody I can stay with? So somebody wrote back to me. They said, I have a cousin here. This works. In Segu, just outside of Segu. You can stay with him. I said, great. So I arrived there about 4 days after I was told to leave and started a new project. So I ended up working with the local government in that commune, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But first I want to give the kind of a general overview of the context of what's happening in Mali, because I'm sure most people here, like myself, don't know a lot about Mali, because it doesn't. It's not really in the press in the US too much, right? So this conflict really started with independence in 1960. Tuareg populations in northern Mali think that they're discriminated against by a government that is mostly run by Southerners. And so they rose up in the early 1960s, shortly after independence. That was violently crushed. They rose up again in the early 90s for the same reasons. They want greater local autonomy. They wanted greater resources going to the north, greater support from the central government. So again, in 1992, they reached a peace agreement, but the Tuaregs said that the central government wasn't honoring that agreement. They weren't providing greater local autonomy, and they weren't providing greater resources for the north. So again, in the early 2000s, they rose up again against the central government, again, violently crushed. A lot of the Tuareg then went to Libya because Gaddafi really welcomed them with open arms and included them in his forces there. Of course, then NATO attacked Libya, killed Gaddafi. The Tuareg now don't have a home, so they come back to Mali, only now they're heavily armed. So they rise up against the government. Again, that's the most recent conflict and the ongoing one that started in 2012. So not only that, but compounding the crisis, stop me anytime if you have any questions, but compounding the crisis, several radical Islamist groups flooded into the unrest and instability that that took over the north and started occupying those spaces. Of course, the French military came and drove them back, but they still occupied many areas in northern and central Mali. And then even worse, adding to this, because of this breakdown and governing authorities have left, there's a breakdown of the social fabric, and this has led to a rise in inter-ethnic conflicts as well, particularly between semi-nomadic Fulani herders and Bambara and Dogon farmers. So traditional dispute resolution techniques are being ignored, pastoral routes are being closed off, and Fulani have for a long time been associated with radical Islamist movements, so they're often targeted just for being Fulani. So this is all contributing to a very chaotic environment, especially in that red zone. And I have these dotted lines because it's not really clear if that connection is, or how stable that connection is. But so, due to the fact that local autonomy has been demanded by northern Malian rebel groups since independence in 1960 and used as a reason to pick up arms against the government, some analysts view successful decentralization as essential to the preservation of the Malian state. However, even though it has been included in past and the current peace agreement, the 2015 Algiers Peace Accords, progress in establishing decentralized institutions and providing sufficient resources for effective local governance is slow. So nevertheless, many Malians see decentralization as a promising step to ending instability. So just a brief few numbers I picked out to show just the humanitarian crisis that's going on. Over 75,000 internally displaced, over 137,000 refugees, 300,000 children out of school, and security is really, it's getting worse. It's definitely not getting better, and it's mostly getting worse in this area, and a lot right here. But this northern area has been fairly stable. So, and then of course 5.2 million in need of food and humanitarian assistance from flooding, shelter, medical, all sorts of things. And this is just in Mali. This conflict is also spreading into Burkina Faso and Niger. So this is where I started my research in Mopti. The Near East Foundation offices in Mopti in the top right. That was my office. Great setup, right? Great place to work in the field. I had these groups that Near East Foundation worked with. They were all ready. I could interview them. It was great. But then I had to leave. So I had to scrap my project, and I arrived here. This is a map of the commune where I worked outside of Segu. It's a rural commune with 28 villages, and so the main town that was on the map would have been here. The commune butts right up to it, and this is the town hall is situated right here. So all of these other villages are rural, and towards the end of the commune, it's about 15 kilometers or a little bit more, so 10 to 12 miles and to the end. So from the town hall. So a little background on the commune where I worked. So they're mostly Bambras. It's the majority ethnic group, but there's significant populations of other ethnic groups, especially the Fulani, Bozo, Jobarami, and Marka. It's a rural commune. It's 28 villages, and the main occupations are farming. Fulani are mostly herders, sheep and cattle, goats, and Bozo traditionally are fishers, fisher people. So in the center there, that was my new office basically. Every day I would get on my bike and hit the dirt road to arrive at villages like, let's see. So my new question when I arrived at the new site, I fortunately was living close to the town hall. So I went to the town hall the day after I arrived. I talked to the Secretary General. I said, look, I'm doing a project on participatory development and local government. He said, great, yeah, you can work here. That's great. There's a project going on right now. Why don't you go to this meeting? So if it wasn't for him, I think that it would have been very difficult to realize this project. So I'll show you a picture of him later. But I came up with the question, and this is really a loose question because I went to my new site. I didn't have a question. I had to scrap the old one. So this is just sort of a rough guide. But is decentralized government in Mali enhancing participatory development by giving local populations greater opportunities to influence decision making? So the methods I used, you can see I attended local government meetings frequently, including the PARCC, which is the Program for Social, Economic, and Cultural Development. And it's created every 5 years, so it's a 5-year plan of development for the commune. I participated in GIZ, it's the German development organization. It's basically equivalent to USAID in the US. So I participated in a GIZ development project that was focused on training people about decentralization, what it is, how to be involved, and then taking that small group of 30 to 40 people, breaking them down into smaller groups, and then taking that information to the villages. So disseminating information about decentralization. And then I did unstructured interviews with 5 different categories of the chiefs and their advisors, women, youth, NGO workers, and what else? Diaspora Malians, and local elected officials, so 6 groups. But I'm not talking about the diaspora Malians in this talk, but you're welcome to. Yeah.
Any UN?
Sorry?
Is there UN here? UN troops in Mali?
Oh yeah, the UN has been there since 2012. They went in really quick after the initial conflict started.
5,000 to 10,000?
It's more than that. I think it's 12,000, and it's the most deadly conflict in the world for UN troops. Sorry. Yeah. So my theoretical approach, this is no groundbreaking theoretical project, but of course I use a framework. I just throw some, and that's the Secretary General in the middle there, and some examples of the facilities that they were working with, and that in the top right is a local town hall. So in anthropology, in the 1990s, there was sort of the analyses of the state kind of highlighted citizen constructions of images and representations of the state. So this approach largely ignored the impact of power relations on these constructions and on interpersonal relations in general. So in addressing this gap, recent studies now explore webs of relationships between power holders and the governed. So my project is very much along these lines. So by observing and exploring the interactions between different sets of actors, my research illuminates power relations and popular understandings of the state and its functions. So this term, institutional bricolage, Francis Cleaver gets a lot of credit for this. I use this term, I approach these issues through the theoretical framework of institutional bricolage. So combining external and local practices in innovative, if sometimes unintended ways, I'm able to analyze how current governance techniques and relationships are influenced by a variety of factors. Political history, village customary law, civil society engagement, patron-client relationships, international political and development agencies, rebel groups, and the diaspora community impact decentralized governance, how people choose to participate, and how citizens and development agencies interact with and alter the processes and spaces created through decentralized government. So, individuals involved in a number of institutions engage in continuous efforts to influence decision-making. So through my methods, participant observation, and interviews, I examine their interrelationships, abilities, and maneuvering to gain a stronger position in the decision-making process. So interrelationships between multiple organizations at the local level involved in local governance also challenge understandings of legibility. So here I also draw on James Scott a lot, and particularly the book Seeing Like a State. And these issues of how the state, tries to quantify and control people and make them legible. But, this idea of legibility also goes several different ways, right? So local institutions can also want to become legible by the state, right? If you take, for instance, the institution of the chieftaincy in Mali, which is still very strong, especially in northern regions, chiefs are losing a lot of their authority. If the state has its way, then they would lose all their authority. But being legible is an opportunity, possibly, for chiefs to become legible to the state and gain more authority by being officially recognized. So this is kind of one idea of legibility that kind of comes up in my research. Furthermore, recent studies rarely focus on external organizations as an alternative to state power, delivering many of the services typically reserved for states. Not only do external development organizations represent an alternative power structure to the state concerning development, they have also been promoting participatory development processes. Much of the population often considers these organizations more powerful actors in the development sector than the state. As a result, there are seemingly two powerful entities involved in the development process, each promoting and opening participatory spaces for guiding local agendas. However, sometimes external organizations are sought by local governments, providing needed resources and creating what many elected officials refer to as a partnership to achieve their development goals. So these factors challenge notions of governmentality as governance techniques created and enforced by a sovereign state. My research offers a more nuanced approach to governmentality by including an analysis of power and governance technologies emanating from foreign governments and development agencies examining the role these institutions play in implementing local development agendas outside their borders. So Gregory Mann coined a term, non-governmentality, right? To kind of cute way of showing how, these NGOs are kind of taking on the roles of states. So now, getting into the more enjoyable part for me anyway, is the content. And I want to do this in a way that, I kind of sidelines myself and focuses more on the voices of the people that I interviewed. So I take some processes and I kind of lump themes into these processes to show how people really interact in certain ways concerning local governance. And one of these is the PDCC, which I already mentioned, the program for the social, economic, and cultural development. So by participating in meetings for the development of this document and interviewing people about their thoughts, how they're involved in the process, I really gained ideas about inclusiveness, how people are included in local governance and how they are able to occupy spaces in local government and be involved. So, arriving in the second biggest village in the commune, and this up here is a chart of how the local budget is supposed to be developed. And you see in the top right in the yellow, there's people are supposed to go from the commune are supposed to go to the villages and really talk to people. You'll see that this doesn't really happen. But arriving in the second biggest village in the commune, I had a meeting set up with the chief and his advisors. This village, more than most, holds a grudge against the town hall, primarily because they claim to be the first village established in the commune, and it's the birthplace of a former Bambara king. The village is situated along the river and consists of a number of different ethnic groups, Bambara, Bozo, and Fulani. Due to its size and diversity, I was happy to set up an interview with the chief and his advisors. And to my surprise, 15 people showed up, representing every neighborhood and ethnic group in the village. Sitting under a large tree in the middle of the chief's compound, I asked, "Do you know the PARCC?" "Yes, every year there is a meeting at the town hall. Every year there is a meeting and we tell them all the problems and they write them down. We tell them this and this, but nothing happens. They listen, they write, but no application. Every meeting we speak and the town hall writes, but they do nothing. This is the problem. It's a big problem. There are a lot of problems, but this is the biggest problem." Continuing with this theme, does the town hall come here to ask about the needs of the village before the commune-wide meeting for PARCC? No, in general, they convene the meeting at the town hall, but they don't come here. The meeting is at the town hall and everybody goes there. All the people tell their problems at the meeting. Everybody has a problem with schools, other things. However, there are no results. The town hall asks the needs of the villages every year, but every year nothing changes. So people are obliged to repeat the same needs again this year. And then they will repeat the same needs next year. So each year the problems augment. Because the old needs aren't being addressed, the new needs are put on top of the old ones and the list grows longer. Has the town hall done any development work in your village? At the moment, there are no projects. We demand projects, but they do nothing. The town hall is obligated to work for the people in the community, but they do nothing. For example, we have a health clinic, but we haven't had any staff for 6 months. We have a pharmacy, but it's closed, and we don't have any medicines. Have NGOs done any projects? I continued. They built the water chateau. They built some classrooms. There haven't been many projects here, but NGOs do a lot of work right now. The government is obliged to do things, but it's NGOs doing a lot of work alongside the government. NGOs are good. When NGOs work a lot, the government does a little with them. The government must do things, but NGOs are there to aid them. NGOs are good, truly, I would say. So going to another village, and a chief up in the right corner, Orange is a communications company in Mali. Phone and internet stuff. I was riding my bike to one of the furthest villages of the commune to meet with the chief of the village, Duga, a nickname which means vulture in Bambara. Although this was always expressed in a joking way by his friends, and I never discovered how he got this name. Although a long ride, it was an easier trip than traveling to many other villages because I could take the paved road the entire way. A blessing and a curse. Despite being the main highway running from southern to northern Mali, it was only 2 lanes, 2 narrow lanes. an unenjoyable, hair-raising experience both literally and figuratively when large buses sped by. I found Duga relaxing under the gua and began chatting. The gua is 4 posts with logs laid across, and they would stack dried grass on top during the dry season to feed their animals. So it was shade. I had already interviewed him in one of my first interviews after arriving in Segu, and since that time had received considerably more information about the commune. Duga used to be a councilman, and I asked him why he didn't go to a recent meeting at the town hall. He said, "The town hall called me the night before the meeting, and I need time to plan in order to go to Segu, especially because fuel is expensive." He continued, "The town hall often doesn't call the chiefs. The town hall often doesn't call the chiefs for meetings, maybe 3 times out of 10. So that was fairly common. These are all chiefs up here, and Duga's in the middle. But they each expressed something similar to that. The one on the top right, I went one day and he showed me a letter which is in French, and most of the chiefs and most of the people in the villages don't speak French. And it was a letter about a meeting at the town hall, and I asked him why he didn't go to the meeting, and he said, "What's the point?" And this chief on the top left, he had a similar sentiment to Duga. I asked him why he wasn't at a recent meeting. He said, "They called me the night before, and I didn't have any time to prepare to go." So back to Duga. I said, "Has the town hall ever given you anything?" He said, "Yes, they gave us a Malian flag because we paid the most taxes 2 years ago. I found that interesting because this year they only paid 20% of their taxes. So I asked why they paid so little. Why should we pay taxes if the town hall doesn't do anything for us?" This is a common sentiment among many of the villages as well. So many of the villages are beginning to revolt against paying the taxes. As one council member put it bluntly to me, as they should revolt. And this is Duga posing with his Malian flag that he got for the village paying the most taxes. So I began my research with the villages during the dry, hot season while I knew I had access, and people were not yet engaged in intensive agricultural activities. After the rain started, I began interviewing NGO workers and elected officials since most lived in town and I could reach them easily. After interviewing people in the villages, it was interesting to gain the perspective of those in the local government and working for NGOs. These 4 pictures are all the same intersection. This is just to show how it changes after the rainy season sets in. And going to the villages becomes fairly difficult if you have to go through that much water. So, a short 2 blocks from the house where I stayed, I went one morning to interview a current council member and past 2-term mayor. He only lost the last election by 12 votes. He's also a retired high school history teacher, so he's well educated for the area, and he's also from that commune. When I first set up the interview, he told me he is a slave to the truth, something I found interesting coming from a politician, especially one in Mali, but hoped on this occasion he was. So the former mayor said that once the PDSEC is complete, we search for a donor or the state. What will the state give us to realize our plan? Or NGOs, all the donors. A mayor is like an entrepreneur. He goes around searching for funds. While most elected officials agree that few projects would be accomplished without the support of donors, many are in disagreement over where power lies in guiding the development process. While the commune is supposed to pilot development, NGOs work with commune governments to implement projects on the one hand. On the one hand, the commune seeks support for its development agenda elaborated in the PDSEC, and on the other, NGOs pitch projects to implement within communes, sometimes assisting with accomplishing goals in the PDSEC and sometimes pursuing their own objectives. Meanwhile, the population perceives NGOs as the drivers of development, with more money and a greater willingness to assist them in achieving their development objectives than the commune government. Ultimately, this impacts how they view the state. Thus, the paradox is an NGO sector with its own agenda providing a significant portion of local development funding to a local government that creates a development plan and theoretically guides the development of the commune. This paradox is illustrated in the former mayor's description of the PDSEC. In our strategy, in the strategy of PDSEC, it is the World Bank. The World Bank that gives the formula for PDSEC. The World Bank doesn't assist in the activities that are a priority. The World Bank instead insists on the services of proximity, schools, health, and village water supply. But the World Bank doesn't assist in the activities of the population. Activities that must be put first are primary activities: agriculture, forestry, herding. But these things are not in the PDSEC. Right now, it is the services of utility that are in the PDSEC, with an accent on education, health, and water. But there's not a particular accent on the promotion of the primary sectors. This is a folly in the PDSEC. To first develop schools when peasants here live very, very rudimentary. How can we finance them? The things put on the list are the basic services that the population can frequent: schools, health, water. But the amelioration and betterment of primary sectors are not put in front. Normally, development of primary sectors, herding, agriculture, industries, etc., must aid access to other sectors of development. So while development workers acknowledge that the state is legally responsible for directing development, they also pointed out the tremendous influence donors wield resulting from their financial contributions. One NGO director stated, "There are a lot of plans, and the definition of policies is aided by the partners. When Mali makes its education policies or decentralization, it's necessary to receive advice from the United States or France. They are donors. They come and give their money under certain conditions. Policies are shaped by big partners, representatives of the World Bank, representatives of UNICEF, representatives of, the international NGOs, USAID or the Netherlands. When the director of USAID speaks, when he says, 'I don't want this,' they listen in Mali. Why does it influence the minister? Because they give money. In practice, the partners are the ones that give the money. So they have a lot of say. They direct things in development. If you go to a Malian school, everything has changed. The US, Canada, or another country gives money. And they want the schools to be different like their model, and things change. If, for example, USAID says it's necessary to change a director or a minister, or they won't give money, you will find that they do it. It's clear, we can't do anything." Another program director at an NGO agreed with this sentiment, adding that NGOs do not just influence the development process, but even take on many of the responsibilities of the state, saying it's actually NGOs that do much of the development work. The Malian constitution says all children in Mali have a right to education, free education, but the state doesn't build schools everywhere. They don't pay teachers, so it's the NGOs that come and construct 2 or 3 schools here and so on. Some NGOs come here and construct schools and even pay the teachers, so the state does not play their role. Here, the state does not play their role. It's like that. I can say it's at least 60%, minimum 40% it's NGOs in Mali. They are the ones creating the infrastructure, schools, wells, dams, even health care centers. Often it is NGOs that fund them. They are practically in every sector. So that was kind of a general topic built around the PDSEC and some issues built around that. And now moving on to the German development project, the GIZ-funded project. So I participated in this. Every 2 to 4 weeks, I and 30 to 40 others attended meetings at the town hall for 2 to 3 days, where the organization, GIZ, disseminated information about decentralization. So ultimately, they attempted to mobilize participants in the project into a citizen action group, tasked with disseminating information about decentralization and the functioning of the town hall. So with this process, through this process, I examine what different actors know about decentralization in general and how it informs their visions of and participation with the state, as well as the effectiveness of the project and how participants were chosen. So this man here, Usman, at the bottom, he's led the project. And I asked him and he's done projects all over Mali at this point, similar types of projects. So I asked him, do you think people really understand decentralization? He said, no, there's not good understanding. You yourself, you saw the activities, the people that were there, they don't know anything. Even the elected officials, the council people, they don't know their roles and responsibilities. So it starts like that, and the population also doesn't understand their roles and responsibilities, their rights and responsibilities. They don't know. That's why we came. We came to form support so that people can better understand their role. No, there is not good comprehension. The situation all over Mali is like that. All over Mali, it's like that. Another, a council person in that one village I referenced, the second biggest in the village, or in the commune, council person from that village, when I asked the same question, he said, no, people don't understand anything. They don't understand anything. It's serious. It's very serious. That is the biggest problem. If they don't understand, they will put anybody in power. It doesn't matter who. They will vote for anybody. If you don't know who you are voting for, you don't understand the importance of that decision. And also the payment of the local development tax, they don't understand its utility. They vote for affinity, they vote for their own personal interests, but in the end, they don't vote for a vision for the commune. And then a local councilwoman in the town, she was part of this project, and she was broken into one of the smaller groups that was supposed to take this information to the villages. And unfortunately, I left right before they got off the ground in their smaller groups to take this information to the villages. But I was there after their first journey and foray into the villages to disseminate this information. And I talked to her after she got back from this trip. And she said, I went to Duga and Musokorobugu, these two other villages in the commune yesterday, as a member of the Citizen Action Group, but they did not welcome us. They didn't even offer us water, which is a big deal in Mali, because when it's 120 degrees, it's always nice to have a cup of water once you get somewhere. They said they pay their taxes, but the mayor doesn't do anything here. And they told us they didn't want us there. I said, I'm not here as a member of the town hall, but I came as a member of the Citizen Action Group. She said, however, things didn't get much better. They do not like the town hall at all. So this is common. In my trips to the villages, I would always ask, because there were representatives in this project from every village in the commune. So when I went to interview people in the villages, I would ask whether it was a women's group, a youth group, or chiefs and their advisors. I would ask them, have you heard any information or received any information from the people that are participating in this project? And they would always get booklets of information about decentralization. Often it was written in Bambara. And it was really good information. But I never found anybody in any village who had received information from somebody who had participated in this project. So that's the GIZ project. So third focus, I examined a major obstacle in sustainable decentralization in my field site, tax collection and why the problem exists and persists. So by analyzing commune meetings and concerning finances and tax collection, as well as interviews, I present information about how different actors perceive taxes and how the political environment of patron-client relationships influences tax collection. In doing so, I will illustrate how most of the inhabitants of villages avoid the town hall, drawing a distinction between customary village governance and official commune governance. Finally, I examine how different people view decentralization locally and in general, especially in comparison to the past regime. Before decentralized government. So people said, they said in the town, the biggest town neighboring where the town hall is located, that they never pay any taxes. This was, but all the work is done in the town hall. So this creates a lot of tension between the villages and the town. But I asked people why people in the Pelangana is the name of the town. Why people in Pelangana don't pay taxes. The mayor said it was just a lack of civic duty, and the town hall isn't creating a good example by paying their own taxes, right? People who actually work at the town hall and council people as well. Other people say, an NGO director told me that people don't trust the state. They just think that they'll pay taxes and the state will steal the money. And another person said that they just don't do anything in the villages, so why would villagers pay taxes? So on to this notion of patron-client relationship. A women's group in a village called Kolotomo, she told me that one time the mayor came there, and the mayor said to her, the town hall doesn't do anything here because Bamba, that's the mayor's name, she said the village didn't vote for her. I said, did she really say that? And she said, yeah, she said it like a joke. But in reality, it's not a joke. So another kind of council person, this is a new council person, but he's been involved in various political activities for several years, and he's from the commune. He had a high-profile job. He's now retired, and he's well respected. And I was asking him about these patron-client relationships, and he's not at all shy about speaking his mind, and he gave me a lot of details concerning all of my questions, to the point that I had to spend 4 different evenings with him to just complete the interview. But when I asked him about politicians paying people money to vote for them, he said everybody does. If you don't give any money, you won't find any votes. There's no party that doesn't give anything. Even our parents, if we don't give them any money, they won't vote for us. I gave a lot of money, but I don't have the resources and influence of Mamu Bamba or Yamusa, the 2 current and former mayor. In all the villages, if you don't give any money, people will not listen to you. There's villages where we give money, but we didn't get any votes. In my own village of Kunkun, my father was born there. I was born there, but I didn't receive any votes. Kunkun and Mpeba. Because of money, Mamu Bamba defeated everybody there. But I went 7 times to Mpeba. My grandmother is from there, the mother of my father. I have a lot of relations in Mpeba. Even now, I have a lot of relations in Mpeba. But Mamu Bamba has more money than me. I gave money, but Mamu Bamba has more money than me. I gave money, but because she gave more, they didn't vote for me. Truly, the villages, she gives a lot. After I went to Kunkun, she gave 2 million or 3 million francs. Kunkun supported her, my childhood friends. Since 7 years old, because of money, they supported Mamu Bamba. Yes, 2,000 francs. And they vote for her because of 2,000 francs, which is about $2.50. They don't understand the importance. They vote for her because of 2,000 francs. Mamu had 2 or 3 cars, and they would give people 2,000 francs and take them to vote for her. Money, what do they say? Money is the cause of war, and you cannot work without money, and you defeat people with money. Another new council person, this was a well-to-do man in my sight, owned a pharmacy, well-educated, just recently got into politics because he really got behind this new party that he thought was shaking things up. He said, I found that the population puts too much importance on the money. The integrity and methods of the candidates poses a problem. The person that gives 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, the money is gone. When they win their posts, the first thing they do is recover their expenditures. They don't have a choice. I spend 20 million, but then the social contract is finished. If I want, I can take a loan from the bank, 20 million, and give sufficient money to everybody I pass. But when I become mayor, the 20 million I was loaned from the bank, I'm obliged to reimburse. And the advantages I get by being at the town hall that are for the population, they are for me. The contract is finished. The advantages of being mayor, when a project comes from France or the United States, Canada, it doesn't matter, to build a school or to build a health clinic or repair roads, I will take 10% or 20%. The work will not go well. The money goes into my pocket in order to recover the 20 million that I spent, and now I have even more. I don't work for the development of the commune, I work for myself. What they do is not good, and until now, that's how it happens. We had tried to promote our platform and knowledge, but if we don't give out money, they won't vote for us. Even if people have confidence in me, if I don't give the money, they will not vote for me. They think it's the only period in which they can profit, but it's the contrary. They ask for money, and if I give them money, when I win the post, the social contract is finished. So according to those I talked to in the village, the town hall only comes for 2 reasons: to collect taxes and to seek votes at election time. So these things, they really point to divide between village and town. 26 of the 29 council people were actually from the town. Only 3 came from the villages. And taxes are not doing anything in the villages, right? They're all the money, all the projects are being done in the town. So all groups acknowledge a space created that permits any and all voices an opportunity to speak, but only elected officials point to the lack of resources as a handicap in realizing village needs. On the other hand, people in the villages have a difficult time understanding local government restrictions when they see the government collecting taxes and completing projects in other villages, particularly the main town where the town hall is based. So finally, I asked people, what's better? Is decentralized government actually better, or do you prefer the old system? And it was really split along, I should say NGO workers and elected officials said decentralized government is better across the board. But in the villages, it was really split. One village said that during the time when the prefect was in charge of the the area, the representative of the state, that it was better. Because he said the town hall doesn't work at all now, and it doesn't do anything. And the corruption was not too much when the prefect was in charge, but now there's a lot more corruption. Another village said the old system was better because they respected the chiefs, and they supported the village and respected the village, but now it's not like that. The town hall does nothing. Another, there's more corruption now. Another, there's no resources for the communes, so they can't do anything. Government is too complicated now. It was more simple previously. So, and then others also support decentralized government. Interestingly, one supports decentralized government because NGOs do a lot more work now. Of course, NGOs are more likely to come if there's country is democratic, right? And others say it's easier to get official documents and participate in local government. So there's other issues that I didn't touch on, the role of civil society, the diaspora Malians that I did work with, and kind of unpack more this discrepancy between customary and state law, especially concerning land issues, which are a big deal all over Africa right now, including in Mali. So in conclusion here, I hope I've painted a picture of the complicated environment, the many different actors, policies, and processes contributing to local decision-making, particularly who is allowed and how individuals are able to participate in local governance. There's a real tension between the villages and the local government, as well as questions of who's driving the decentralization process. Whereas much decentralization literature focuses on the obstacles of implementing successful decentralized governance, resources, and human capacity, which I agree with, these are the main obstacles, resources and human capacity, I want to gain a better understanding of why these deficiencies exist. I hope to do this by examining how individuals interact with one another, what spaces are open and closed to whom, and how people perceive local governance. Sorry, I forgot about the slides, but this was from this, here, these pictures are from the end of the year kind of meeting, and this was a big deal. There was music, these masked dancers up there. It was obviously funded by this Dutch ambassador, this white guy in the middle. And it just went over what villages are paying taxes, how much, what percentage, and then of course the winner gets a Malian flag, whoever paid the most taxes. And I couldn't get a digital copy, but this is a list of all the villages that are paying taxes, and some of it you can't really see, but you can see in total here they only ended up paying 22.32% of the total. So they're not really receiving a lot of revenue from the local taxes, which is where land becomes very important. And I forgot this. Salif Keita is a Malian musician and called the Golden Voice of Africa. And this actually just came out a couple of days ago in an interview with a German magazine. He said democracy is not a good thing for Africa. We are all happy to see democracy come to Africa, but it destroyed the human sensibility. To have a democracy, people have to understand democracy. And how can people understand when 85% of the people in the country cannot read or write? They need a benevolent dictator like China has. Someone who loves his country and acts for his country. So this, not so intense, but this sentiment of it's not the right time for decentralized government is very common, especially among diaspora Malians. So, yeah, I think that's it.